Seung showed her champion's mentality in a thrilling women's singles final. Mathias, Christiansen and Alexandra Bøje continue their fabulous 2026 season, and Rankireddy Shetty not only ended Kim Won-ho and Seung Jae's 34-match unbeaten streak, but they won their first title since 2024. All of that and more in this week's episode of Beckman's Breakdown, the show where I take a look at all of the BWF World Tour events at Super 750 and Super 1000 level, including the majors and the team events. This week was the Singapore Open Super 750, and to not start the episode on a negative footing, but given the fact that next year when the World Tour goes through some changes, with one of them being that the Singapore Open 750 is going to get demoted to a Super 500, this could be my last Beckman's Breakdown on the Singapore Open for a few years, at least for the next, well, actually you don't know, sometimes it could change, but it seems it's going to be for at least the next 4 years, the next cycle of World Tour events. And for me, that's a real shame, because the Singapore Open is a beautiful event. It looks really nice. It comes across really well on the broadcast. I can see from the pictures inside the arena, it's an absolutely fantastic stadium. Hopefully, I get the chance in the future to go there and either commentate or just watch the tournament. But another reason why I feel that's a little bit sad is we're not losing the Singapore Open, don't worry. So we still get to see this. But for me, the Singapore Open, the Singapore Indoor Stadium specifically, is probably the trickiest arena for the top players to play in. And that's for the simple reason of just how extreme and unpredictable the drift is inside the arena. Now, wherever you go in the world, if you watch, no matter what tournament, if it's played in an arena, you're going to get some sort of drift. It doesn't matter if you're playing in Denmark or China or Australia or Singapore, the drift is generally there. Now, drift is caused by air currents within the arena. A shuttle is incredibly light, so it doesn't take much for it to be affected. If you add to that numbers of people in the arena, aircon in a lot of the Asian countries, all of this can have an effect on the shuttle, and that's what you'll hear commentators always relate to as the drift. Now, some halls don't have much. The Thomas Nyberg Cup in Horsens, Denmark, the arena there, the Forum Horsens, was quite a small, intimate arena, so the drift was rather limited. The Singapore Open is not the biggest of venues, but for whatever reason, the drift inside it is rather extreme. It has not just front to back drift, but it has side to side. And what makes it really hard, and I don't quite know how to explain this, is that on one court it seemed you had left to right as well as the front to back, but on the court next to it you had right to left. So for a lot of the players, being able to adapt to these difficult, tricky playing conditions, that's what makes it so difficult to play inside the Singapore Open. With drift, does often come a lot of 3-game matches, especially in singles, as usually the faster end is so difficult to play. Now, the reason for this and why it affects singles players a little more is that you try to use the back line with height a little bit more often in singles. You're forced to lift more often in doubles. Doubles, as you can imagine, especially the men's game and the mixed, very flat, very fast. So the back line, although it is important, is slightly less used as it is in singles. So when you're playing singles and you're on the slow end, you can punch your shots more, and if you're slightly in trouble, slightly late, you can always give it a bit of power without worrying too much about it going out the back. When you have the drift with you, so when you're on the faster end, it is so easy. You'll be surprised how little it takes for the shuttle to go long. So it means that if you're even slightly out of position, slightly tired, and you lose focus just for a split second, errors will come in. Sideways drift is similar, but front to back is the harder one, as you can always aim a little central and get away with it. You don't exactly want to hit a little short. So yeah, I wanted to talk about the drift. I wanted to mention it because I think it's obviously one of the big factors that goes into wins and performances at this Singapore Open, and it will also go this week at the Indonesia Open, where the Astoria is also a difficult drifty arena to play in. But I also wanted to mention it because if I mention it later, I don't want to have to explain myself every single time. So that out of the way, let's get into the first topic. Now, I'm going to start this by saying in the women's singles, we had an absolutely epic final between Seung and Akane Yamaguchi, with the match ending 21-19 in the deciding game to Seung. I mentioned in my very brief opening that it was a champion's mentality by Seung. And that's because she was 19-16 down in that deciding game before winning, rattling off 5 straight points. Now, there were plenty of tactical things going on, and I've had a lot of questions about those final 5 rallies, so I'm going to actually talk about this final a little bit later on. I've opened up the women's singles because it segues nicely into a topic that I want to talk about, because I don't want to overlook a few key performances. It was a fantastic women's singles final, but we had some brilliant matches elsewhere in the draw. One of my favourite, if not my favourite match, came in the women's singles. But there was also some very good performances. And it shows to me that maybe the golden generation of women's singles isn't quite done yet. Now, since the Paris Olympics, we've had a few retirements of players from that generation. Former Olympic champion and 3-time world champion Carolina Marin, Tai Tzu Ying, arguably the most talented badminton player ever to exist, and the Paris Olympic silver medalist He Jiao. When those retirements, to be precise, are combined with players like PV Sindhu, Nozomi Okuhara, and Ratchanok Intanon dipping in recent years, and newer players emerging as they always do, many felt that the golden generation was over. Well, in Singapore, maybe we shouldn't think that. Now, some of these players I'm going to mention, their good performances haven't started at the Singapore Open, but I still wanted to talk about them. First one, Chen Yu Fei. She reached back-to-back finals at the last 2 events in Malaysia and Thailand, the 2 Super 500 events. And in the semi-finals, she reached in Singapore, and she took Seung to 3 games, which was, I think, rather remarkable, because that's a lot of badminton. That's 14. It would be a 14th match by the time that she'd faced Seung. Seung overlooked the 500 events. She's focusing on just the 750s and the thousands this year. So the fact that she came in probably a little tired and was still able to put in such a performance against Seung is a real credit. But that's something that she's admitted that she actually needs, because she said after the Uber Cup, she's felt a little bit slow on her feet. And that's been quite noticeable for me. Like when she played in Thailand and Malaysia, she reached a final but lost to both Ratchanok and Akane Yamaguchi, and especially against Akane Yamaguchi. One thing, she simply could not keep up with the attacking speed and pace of the Japanese player. She said one way that she was going to fix this, or one way that she could get her form back, get her speed back in her legs, was by simply playing more and more matches. And she's clearly done that with 14 matches under her belt in 3 weeks, and she will be playing this week in Indonesia. Be interesting to see how far she gets there. But what was quite impressive by Chen Yu Fei for me, not the fact that she reached 2 finals or went to 3 games of Seung. I mentioned the fatigue, but I felt in her quarterfinal where she beat Miyazaki of Japan, who actually I personally think, quick side note, was playing some of her. She seems to be getting herself back into some of her previous form. Chen Yu Fei seemed to be getting faster and faster. She was a bit down and out, to be honest. I thought she was going to lose that quarterfinal in straight games, but towards the end of the second and then in the third, her speed just went up a whole level. And added to that, it was also her accuracy. She played with phenomenal accuracy. Some of the best accuracy I saw from any player in those tricky, drifty conditions inside the stadium. Yeah, in that match versus Seung, I felt she was her most nimble in a while. She was just clearly not quite fresh enough in the legs to be able to sustain it for 3 full games. But a very positive tournament for her, very positive 3 weeks, and definitely moving in the right direction. Ratchanok Intanon. Now, I mentioned Ratchanok right at the start in terms of a player who was dipping. That's a little bit unfair because This year or last year, we saw Ratchanok kind of re-find herself. She started the year, I can't remember her ranking, but it was quite far down on what we expect from her, and she set a goal of wanting to reach the top 8 in the world, which she did. And now I think the new target is to try getting back inside the top 5 in the world. And the way that she's been playing, she certainly can do that. However, this year, 2026, she has had some injury issues, most notably with her knee. And although she won the Malaysia Masters, she admitted that she was still worried about her knee, and in an Instagram post, or an interview, she thanked her knee for not giving up on her. Now, I must admit, with that in mind, sometimes Malaysia Masters was the week before Singapore. If her knee still wasn't feeling 100%, I thought she'd come into Singapore and might have a poor tournament, and then she'd head into Indonesia Open, another arena where she likes playing, and maybe have a better performance then. But she put in another great performance in Singapore, and she was sublime. And I think had she not faced Yamaguchi, I'm saying not necessarily has she faced Seung, but I think if she had faced anyone else in the draw in the quarters, she would have made the semi-finals. Her match with Yamaguchi was probably the best match I saw at the Singapore Open. Definitely one of the best matches those two have played against them. And next one, the one that did actually really come about from the Singapore Open, we've seen signs at odd tournaments here and there, is PV Sindhu of India, the former Olympic silver medalist, former world champion. She put in performance befitting of those accolades. It was a brilliant tournament for Sindhu. She reached the quarters, and she had one of her best performances in recent times against Seung. She genuinely troubled Seung and made that match very difficult for her. You could see that Seung didn't feel all too comfortable for quite a few moments within their match. Now, Sindhu beat the seeded Wardani in the opening round and followed up with a clinical win over Riko Gunji of Japan. Now, what stood out to me was her net play seemed much improved, especially in the second round. She was unplayable from there, but more than that, it was her speed and intensity and ability to maintain that intensity. So a little bit like Ratchanok, where she admitted that she's been focusing more on her physical rather than her skills. I mean, she is a player that can kind of put those to the side. Sindhu probably isn't. She's not as racket gifted as some of the other women's singles players that she's played alongside. But where she's always been so good, she uses her height very well. She's got good, powerful attack. She fights for everything, and she's got a great tenacity, and she can maintain really good intensity. And for the first time in a long time, I saw her ability to do that, to sustain her highest level for longer than just odd patches within a match. She was always ready to chase, always ready to take the initiative in the rallies if it presented itself, and was willing to work really hard throughout the match. That middle point I made is quite important, and it's usually a sign of fitness for players. If a player, this isn't easy, but if you take the physicality of being able to chase shuttles and attack, they're both hard, but they both require different, sometimes you see a player who's like really willing to chase after it, but they get a half attack and they're still in defensive mode. They're kind of like, they're still in like, I'm just going to chase it, even though they could have maybe got on and changed it to their attack. Whereas Sindhu, for me, that's where she actually showed some real improvements, or some, real quality in her game. She was getting a lot more back than I'd seen of her in a long time. But then, if suddenly a chance presented itself, she was very quick to get on the attack, and she was willing to do it. It was that kind of thing that I've seen her do in the past. She can do it very effectively with her height. It's very hard to get it past her and get around her, especially in the drifty conditions where it's hard to go out to the lines, and she made full use of that. It was really good. The drift can make the court smaller, so can actually make it easier for her to intercept. It's also hard if players are able to open her up. I spoke right at the beginning that if you're slightly late, to control the drift is hard. I actually felt Sindhu's ability to do that was also pretty good. So yeah, it's, for me, when it comes to these kind of players, it's the basics I'm looking at, is what's making the difference. And for me, there was a little bit more edge in her physical. And I think that bleeds into her game because she's always been quite a physical player. She's always got a powerful attack ready to get onto it, but before she looked a little slow. She was always, if she was slightly on the back foot, she could never really recover, especially against the slightly trickier players. Like, for example, a player she played in the first round, Mordani, but here, much more stable, much faster, and she was able to sustain it. Yeah, just absolutely brilliant stuff. And the last one, obviously a player part of the golden generation, is the player that almost won it, the player that reached the final, my favourite badminton player, Akane Yamaguchi. So I'm very happy that she is back playing the kind of badminton that she is. Now, Yamaguchi won the Thailand Masters and then reached the final here. She also got her first win in 7 meetings against Wang Ziyi in the semi-finals. Funnily enough, the first of those 6 consecutive wins for Wang Ziyi came at last year's Singapore Open, also in the semi-finals. So that's come full circle. Now, for me, Yamaguchi's speed is on another level. I think she is the fastest women's singles player in the game today. And she's been one of the fastest pretty much throughout her whole career. Her ability to retrieve and move around the court is incredible considering how short she is. But one thing she hasn't, especially in her last 2 matches against Wang Ziyi, for example, she hasn't been able to sustain it. In both her last 2 matches against Wang Ziyi, other than the Singapore Open, she won the opening game, but then lost the next 2 rather comfortably. Here in Singapore and also in Thailand, she could. And what makes this even more incredible is that I believe she has only been back to full training for a few weeks or so. So I think she is building towards something, maybe a record-breaking 4th world title. She'll certainly be a very hot contender in Delhi in August. She was always going to be a contender, but most people would have probably seen her as for a bronze medal or a silver. I think we can classify her as someone who's got a chance at another gold. Now, one sign for me, other than her ability to sustain her speed, is I like the fact that when she's playing with lots of variation in attack, when she's playing a right-hander from either side, she can play that drop shot to their forehand absolutely brilliantly. But if she's pulling off those attacks frequently, not making too many mistakes, then she is in good form. And also, again, this is just a feeling I get. I think I've mentioned this before when talking about Yamaguchi, where whilst she never gives up, she always fights to the end. There's always this sense that she doesn't quite believe that she either has the speed or the legs in her to sustain the level she needs to beat the Wang Ziyis and the Seungs, the 2 players that are very physically very, very strong. In Singapore and in Thailand, I didn't get any of those signs. I had this feeling that she believed she was physically in a position where she can sustain it long enough to be able to win. So she had belief that she can win, and that for me is a really positive thing. But like I said, I will talk about the final against Seung a little later. I want to move on, and I want to move on to the mixed doubles, starting with the winners, the champions, Mathias Christiansen and Alexandra Bøje. 3 tournaments played in 3 weeks, 2 titles and a semi-final. It has been a rather incredible period for the Danes, but it's been a pretty good 2026. They won the Europeans. They got to the final in the Orléans Masters, and they reached 2 other finals in India, which was a Super 750, and Indonesia earlier this year. As Jill Clark said in one of their matches, possibly right now, based on current form and current results, they could possibly be the best mixed pair in the world. They were absolutely incredible in Singapore, none more so than in that semi-final against the new Chinese pair of Gao Jia Xuan and Wei Ya Xin. I've been reflecting a little bit on their performances, and I was reflecting on their performances throughout the tournament, and in all honesty, with their style and general approach to mixed doubles, I'm not too surprised that they did so well in Singapore. Their style and approach suits these conditions extremely well, especially Mathias Christiansen. He is a player who's not afraid to come forward. And I think what helps that is that he has a lot of confidence in Bøje being able to deal with the back very well. On top of this, I think what also helps is if when they are on the defence, I know defences are harder in drifty conditions, but the defense is so strong generally that even when it's down a little bit, it's still insanely strong. So they apply a lot of pressure to their opponents in every single department. They can survive or they can at least get their opponents to play a number of more attacks, which always opens up the chances for either a counter or an error. But when they're on the front foot and when Mathias is just steaming forward, they're so hard to get away from. Mathias was almost swarming the net. In the semi-final, it was absolutely incredible how fast. I think once or twice I saw him play a drop shot, and within the blink of an eye, he's up on the net, faster than even the singles players. Now, I'm not surprised he does this, because in a drifty hall, it is more difficult to lift over a pair, so you can apply a lot of pressure coming forward, knowing full well that it's not going to go over your head as often. But also, I can remember speaking to Mathias at the BXL event, if you remember that, where they had 3v3s. And one thing that he said to me about there was, it doesn't matter if it's the right time or not to come forward anyway, because if you don't, you'll lose. And I think they probably had that same mentality, him and Alexandra, here. They probably felt, if we hang back, if we don't take our chances and step forward, we're going to be slightly late and we're going to have to lift, and you don't want to be doing that. I think he was trying to exert a huge amount of pressure. And I think the other thing about the BXL one, when he said it doesn't matter if it's the right time, is, to me, what Mathias was doing was not just a tactical ploy, although I guess you could put it under that umbrella, but he was trying to exert psychological pressure all the time. Whenever his opponent was playing it, if it was slightly below tape, didn't matter if they were taking it a little late at the back, or even half okay at the back, or half okay at the net, they knew that he was going to be there. It put huge amounts of pressure, and you saw not many pairs, well, no pair really could hold up to that throughout an entirety of a 3-game match. Now, what made this even more impressive for me, and I think this kind of tactic would work to an extent, but you'd get found out if you were just diving forward and just hitting everything hard and fast. What Mathias did brilliantly, and actually, to be fair, I've just mentioned him, but Alexandra also was doing this too. I think she had the same mentality. They were clearly communicating that to each other, was that he would sometimes steam forward, but he was still playing the soft touches. He was still playing the patient play. He was still finding gaps. He'd still come in there, and if he spotted a gap over the top, he'd still try to go for it. So his variety in that, he wasn't just steaming forward and just whack, 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 whack. It was controlled. And there was actually another player in the draw that I'm talking about later that also did that extremely well. Now, I'm not just going to talk about Christiansen and Bøje when it comes to the mixed doubles, because I also want to talk about some other mixed pairs and my thoughts on them. Most of these are new/new-ish. Now, I can't quite remember when these two got together. I think they might be under the newish bracket. They might not be, so do correct me. But I have to talk about them because they were the other pair in the final, the Japanese pair of Yuichi Shimogami and Sayaka Hobara. They got to the final. This was their best tournament run ever, and along the way they had a huge win over Dichapon and Tsubasara, where they implemented an almost no-lift style of play, or when they did lift, very flat. They did this effectively in the final as well, actually, especially in the opening game. I think that's what kind of got them the opening game, or one of definitely the key factors. They just weren't able to sustain it. They were helped in that final that in the opening game they were putting the slower end where those flatter, punchier lifts could work. And then I think in the second where they couldn't do it, they kind of went within themselves, went back, and the Danes pressured it. And then once the Danes got that second game, I think that momentum rolled into the third. There was odd moments in the third where I felt the Japanese were starting to kind of impose it, but they couldn't do it for sustain long enough. And obviously the fact that then it switched again to the final half where it was even harder for them to do it. They just weren't able to sustain it. But in the first game, they were implementing a similar style that they did against the Thais. They wasn't just that. I also felt in the semi-final, when they played against Capilla and Crasto, another pair that had a great tournament, I thought their performance there was good. Again, it was from both pairs a bit of an up and down, like dipping in and out of what needed to be done. But when it came to the crunch, especially that third game, I felt the intensity from the Japanese pair, the moving forward. You're going to hear me say that a lot because it was such an important tactic in all disciplines. I felt they just stepped it up a bit, especially Shimogami really using his lightning speed. Talking of Shimogami, he has a delightful touch above and below the tape, but also in tight situations at the net as well. He has good speed, and for some reason, I noticed this because I watched him, I commentated on him at the Thomas Cup. His build and the way he moves, I don't know why, it gives me a Kevin Tsukumoyo vibe, although, he has less skills than Tsukumoyo. I think pretty much everyone is in that bracket, but he certainly has a bit more power. It's just the way he carries himself and the way that he moves around the court in certain aspects just kind of gave me that vibe. I'm not sure if anyone else was feeling that too. Sayaka Hobara has a great amount of power, and she does seem like someone who would be more suited to women's doubles, but she does have good vision on when to come forward, which is something that a lot of women's doubles players don't quite have when they try to play mixed doubles. Together they work well. I saw some nice right-left-handed combinations, and I think Hobara is also fast enough to keep up with the speed of Shimogami, who likes to play at quite a quick pace. Next pair to talk about, obviously I have to talk about the new pair of Gao Jia Xuan and Wei Ya Xin. Now, I'm not quite sure why Wei Ya Xin obviously is currently world number 2 with Jang Zhang Bang. Why they split, or whether this is temporary or not. If any people that have information on that, please do update in the comments. But if it is a permanent fix, or it's going to be one, it could be quite a good one. And I think Wei Ya Xin actually is quite happy because she said before the Singapore Open, things have been going well for us so far. I'm glad to have him, talking about Gao, as my partner. So that's very positive signs. Like I said, they've played 3 tournaments. They reached the quarterfinal in Thailand. They won the Malaysia Masters and the semi-finals in Singapore. They've only lost to the Danish pair of Christiansen and Bøje, and have beaten the likes of Dukel and Delru, Chen Changji and Toei, and Tang Chen Man and Se Ying Sweat. So they've had some great wins in their very short time together. Now, what I like about Gao Jia Xuan, and why I think it'd be a pretty good choice for the Chinese coaches to possibly try them over a longer period, or potentially with the idea of making them permanent, is that I think he brings something forward, or brings something to this pair that was slightly lacking with Zhang Zhengbang. And that for me is below the tape quality and control. Above the tape, or when in a very attacking position, there aren't many better than Zhang Zhengbang. When I spoke to Christian Luque, who was the physical coach for Zheng Siwei and Wang Yachong and a number of other Chinese pairs, he said that he had never seen a more athletic player in the Chinese team than Zhang Zhengbang. I call him the kangaroo boy because he can almost just spring up absolutely out of nowhere. So obviously when he's up on the attack, he's got great angles, great power, good variation. He also has a pretty solid defense to smashes. I've seen him do a lot of retrieval, but if he has to play with not much pace or slightly below the tape, I feel that he can't quite get it back from his opponents as much as he probably needs to. Whereas I feel Gao has a little bit more, like I said, quality and control from there. So when he was below tape, he's still able to exert pressure onto his opponents or to get the attack back. So for me, that just brings a slightly different element to their game. He also has a great attack and speed, but although it isn't obviously quite to the level of Zhang Zhengbang. I would also say that I think Gao is a little bit more intense with his play than Zhang Zhengbang. Now, in their quarterfinal in Singapore against Tang and Se, Bobby Griffin on the commentary said that it did overspill, almost he was playing too intensely. But personally, I quite liked this. It was needed in Singapore. If you dropped your intensity even by a second, you were going to lose. You had to be willing to take a few blows to the face, play a few, go for things, and it's either an error or you get struck straight back at you, because if you just play too passively or defensively, it wasn't a long-term strategy. So you needed to play with an increased intensity. I also think that intensity and being able to control it under maximum speed will improve with more time at this level. Let's not forget he hasn't played at this level for very long. And I also think that intensity helps get Wei Ya Xin involved a little bit more. Now, in Singapore, like I already said, there was nothing they could really do against Christiansen and Bøje. The Danish pair were on fire in the semi-finals, but I do like this pair. Gao that is, seems to slot in with Wei Ya Xin pretty nicely. And with these big wins and performances, clearly he has something that means he can deliver. Now, I said I'd like to see them for longer term, and I think one big reason for that is not just because of this early success, but we need to see this pair and their success long term, because obviously they're new. All the other top players in the world obviously know how Wei Ya Xin plays. They know her weaknesses and her strengths. They probably don't know too much about Gao and also how these two work as a pair. So, say, give it another 5-6 tournaments or to the end of this year, will we start to see other pairs figure them out? You could argue that the Danes, having played them 3 times in 3 weeks, figured them out by the 3rd time and had a clear game plan, and it worked. Maybe we'll start to see other pairs be able to do the same. So that's why I'd like to see them more. It'd be interesting to see whether they can continue to develop. Can they sustain this sort of level, or once other pairs figure them out, will we start seeing them lose a bit more, and then maybe we're going to see them split up again? There's all those questions, which is why I think the Chinese coaches would probably be wise to don't give them too short a period. We need to see them. When it comes to this, I know you got the LA Olympics, which this is an interesting time to make this choice, and I don't think the Chinese coaches are going to have all too much time blessed on them to make a decision whether they keep this pair or whether they go back to Jang Zhengbang with Wei Ya Xin. There's also the factor I don't know what's wrong with Zhang Zhengbang, why I haven't seen him, and maybe that's another reason why we might see. There's many things up in the air, but if they do stay together, it is going to be interesting to see their progression and how other pairs react to them, and if they can find solutions. But definitely a very, very positive start for that Chinese pair. Obviously, I have to talk a little bit about Kim Jae-hyung and Jang Ha-jeong, the Korean pair, the Asian champions, actually. And that's the kind of result that got them a lot of attention, because since Kim Won-ho and Seo Seung-jae have focused on men's doubles, Cha Yu-jung's retirement and Jung No-yeon not really being used too much, not quite sure what her future holds, Korea have lacked a mixed pair. So I think many eyes were on them in Singapore, and I felt they played okay. They lost to the world champions in the 2nd round, Cheng Tang-ji and To Yi-wei. I think had they nicked that opening game where it was 20-all and Kim served the net, maybe things were different. But that's a huge if. For me, Jang Ha-jeong didn't look as solid as she did at the Asian Championships, but then again, the conditions here are much tougher. And, barring Seung, who managed to find a way, faster, driftier conditions have never really suited the Korean pairs all too much. So I'm not too surprised that they weren't able to be not just the fact that they lost early in comparison to the Asian Championships, but the way that they played, because I was very impressed with their defensive strength, their power, when they played in China at the Asian Championships. But then again, the hall was slower and less drifty there. These were completely different in conditions, and it kind of shows where they need to develop. They don't look as strong in the mid-court battles. They're okay if they could expand it naturally. But mixed is won and lost in those mid-court battles. Still early days for them, and I think Kim Jae-hyung has improved a lot since when I first saw him at the Korea Masters at the end of last year. So I am sure that he will continue to do so, and will extend the same thing to Jang Ha-jeong. So definitely an interesting pair to keep your eye on as far as Korean mixed doubles are concerned. And the last one I want to talk about is also another pair that only reached the 2nd round, but one that I noticed a number of improvements, and that is Yuta Watanabe and Mai Taguchi. Now, this pair have been together a little while now, since the Paris Olympics, and haven't set the world alight, and there's been a lot of question marks about whether is Watanabe being wasted with Taguchi? Should he just get back with Igarashi, which isn't going to happen? She's definitely focused on the women's doubles now. Should Japan give Yuta Watanabe a different partner? He played with a few others, like Matsumoto. Was it Matsutomo, sorry, and done pretty well. Now, in regards to that, obviously recently when Watanabe and Taguchi won the bronze medal at the Asian Championships, everyone was like, oh, this is a positive sign. But then they lost unexpectedly to a rather unknown pair in Mexico. So again, and I know that got like a Reddit thread on it. And again, there was question marks against this pair. Now, they only got to the second round here in Singapore, and you could also see the Singapore Open as another positive followed by a negative, and that is that they beat the former All England champion, Guo and Chen in the first round in a very good display, but then lost to the Indian pair of Kapila and Crasto. But all of that aside, I was actually impressed by their level, and I think it shows some improvements that have been made, not just individually on Taguchi's side, but them as a pair. Now, it must be said that a possible explanation for them losing, other than I felt the Indians did play really well, but in that match against the Indians, Watanabe did fade pretty badly in the third game. But I think it might have been due to an injury to his left leg, because he has sadly withdrawn from the Indonesia Open and Australia Open. Hopefully he's not out for too long, because they've just got their ranking high enough, and I want to see them continue on. But anyway, back to the improvements. For me, let's focus on Taguchi first. Her defense looked much stronger. She was getting a lot of attention on her in both those matches, and I felt she held up to it really, really well. It was always her defense that kind of got called into question. The other thing, I think as a pair, one area where I really think they've improved is both being left-handed. When the play's pulled over to the forehand side and say Watanabe's attacking, I've seen a number of pairs being able to kind of drive it diagonally and get Watanabe to play on the backhand. I noticed a number of times Taguchi actually stepping out and protecting that corner, protecting the backhand corner. And that goes for when it's on the diagonal, but also on the straight. She was intercepting that really, really well. And I started to notice that Watanabe wasn't worried about having to cover that corner as much. He had much more faith in Taguchi being able to cover that. And what that kind of did is not only protect them in that certain situation, but for me, for the first time watching them in Singapore since they got together, I felt that Watanabe was focused solely on what he was doing. I felt that up until this point, he's been so busy, worry might be the wrong word, but worrying about, if I hit that there, is Maya going to take that one? Do I need to cover this? And so his mind was too split on too many things. I felt in Singapore, it was laser focused on what he was doing. As a result, he started to kind of play more of his drop shots, more variety in his attack, and he just looked more like he could follow his own shots, because he knew that if it went over to Taguchi's side, she was going to cover that a little better. She could hold up her end. And also on defense, I said Taguchi defense got better, so Watanabe's more confident. If I need to lift it, it's okay. She can handle this sort of situation. So her confidence is growing, and I think as a result, Watanabe is starting to focus more on himself. He's less concerned about what his partner is doing. And I think if they can continue that, or hopefully this injury isn't too severe, and they can keep working on that, I think they still need to keep playing the lesser tournaments, which they've done. I think that's been a big part of their success, or their way they've been finding these solutions and getting a better synergy together and working out, is that they've been playing the lesser tournaments where it's a little bit easier, and Taguchi's getting more confident in those ones. I've seen a few of their matches from the lower tournaments where they've won, and they're the kind of things I saw, and it's now transitioning into the higher level. So yeah, it was really good that they took a little step away. They played some low tournaments. They kind of had to because of their ranking, but I think it's paid off massively, and I think it's really good that we're starting to see that at the higher level. Now, this actually segues quite nicely into who I want to talk about next. And you might not quite understand why when I first mention it, but I want to talk about Rankireddy and Shetty, the winners of the men's doubles event. What an absolutely fantastic win for them. Their first title since the Thailand Open in 2024. Now, Rankireddy and Shetty not only ended one streak with this win, the 34 match winning streak by Kimono Seung Jae in the semi-finals, but they also ended their own streak of having lost 3 consecutive finals since that Thailand Open in 2024. And they extended one other streak, sadly for the Indonesian fans. They extended Alfian and Fikri's losses in finals to 5. Now, I've had absolutely numerous questions about Rankireddy and Shetty and what have they done differently or what they did well. Now, I want to quickly go over what I felt they did well. I want to keep this quite brief because what I want to focus on is what they've done differently. And that's where it ties in a little bit with what I just spoke about with Watanabe and Taguchi. So what they did well, for me, Shetty was an absolute demon in the mid-court forward. I've spoken at length about the importance of this in every discipline, but in men's doubles, it couldn't be more important. You had to be willing to come forward, to get on top of the tape. Getting on top of the net is winning the net is absolutely crucial, but winning it where you can get the shuttle coming in the downwards direction. We all know Shetty is good here. He's very efficient. But what he did even better here is not just winning those battles, but he wasn't just hitting hard. He was playing kind of like, not soft, but the mid shots. The ones where he's just kind of pushing it down. He's just getting the shuttle in the downwards direction, so opponents kept having to hit up. And then he's so big that he was doing this that it was almost impossible to get through him. I've noticed in the past, sometimes when he's getting in those situations, he was forcing things a bit more, too much, making errors. Here, I felt he kept his patience there. He was just making sure he's focusing more on getting there rather than the shot itself. If I get there early, I don't need to play the best winning shot ever. I just need to be there. I need to be there and keep setting up, and I'll eventually, if I do that enough, I'm going to get a bigger chance to finish it. And he did it absolutely brilliantly. And I felt that actually that's something that Rankireddy also did. He's not as good as Shetty at the front of the court, but he also took up that battle of, I must come forward. He was willing to take a few blows. He was willing to know that it wouldn't pay off every single time, but overall it would. Bigger picture badminton. And that's actually some good advice for any player, is sometimes it's you lose a certain situation or you do something, you make a mistake. It's very easy to go, oh, I shouldn't do that, and then you shy away from it. You sometimes got to know that, okay, it's the right thing, but I'm willing to make a few errors or to get counted at me, say let's say out of 10 times. I know that isn't a match, but you've got to be willing. If you take 3 losses, but as a result, you get 7 wins, you're winning the match overall. And I think that's what Rankireddy was willing to do. He's willing to take a few of those knocks, knowing that in the bigger picture, it was the right thing to do and exerted a lot of pressure. Because I spoke about in the mix, Christiansen and Bøje were doing that, and it's very hard to get over them. Even harder in men's doubles because there's 2 men, and 2 big men at that have huge smashes. And there was so many times where you could see pairs try to go over them. They'll push in the lift, and either one of them went up and just went bang, absolutely spanked it down. Now, that's what I felt they did well. There's obviously other things, they made less mistakes. They didn't give away too many runs of points, which they've done in the past. But overall, I felt the willingness and ability to take on the net and do so with calmness and patience was quite crucial. Now, the biggest difference for me, and this is where it links into what I said about Watanabe and Taguchi, more so Watanabe, is remember I just said that Watanabe was not worrying about what his partner was doing. He had more confidence. He didn't have to think about that. Nothing detracted from what he individually had to do, what his role was in each and every rally. He knew he had a bit more faith in Taguchi being able to do it. He didn't have to go, oh, well, what if this happens? There was no what ifs. He was just focused on what he needed to do. I felt that for the first time in a long time, I noticed it a little bit in the Thomas Cup, actually, in the match I commentated when they played against Chinese Taipei, that the Indian players, Rankireddy Shetty, were thinking solely for themselves. They were not worried about their partner. Now, I think the reason they have been a bit worried, especially I've seen this from Shetty, was that Rankireddy has been dealing with shoulder injuries, and they've also had numerous other issues. Shetty's had a bad back the last year or so. Obviously, Rankireddy's shoulder. There's been family bereavements. There's been lots of shit going on, and I think as a result, that's just affected them. They're slightly worried about what the other one's doing. That almost it affects them. And I mentioned the Thomas Cup in that match when I was commentating. I think one big thing, because I remember that match against Taipei, it was very, very close, but in the third, they kind of got control. They were controlling the match by the third. And for me, I said that it was Rankireddy that started to play really good badminton. And I think that had a knock-on effect to Shetty, whereas he started to kind of get confidence from the fact that Rankireddy was playing well. He was no longer trying to cover for him or worried about what he's going to do, they could both just focus on themselves. They don't need to worry about teaming up. They've played long enough. They know each other inside out. But when you have that slight doubt in your partner, whether you mean it or not, or whether it's slightly detracting, that's all it takes. Now, if you're not quite following what I'm saying, let me put it this way. Maybe something you can relate to. If you ever had an injury, or you've been ill, or you're playing in a tournament, or you're playing and you know that you haven't played much or whatever, you're not fully fit. When you're playing, that is on your mind. So for me, I've got a few injury issues. I'm sometimes thinking, oh, is my knee going to hurt on this lunge? Every time I lunge forward. And that always takes away. You're not fully thinking on what you need to do to beat the player. And that's what you should always, that's why you train. That's why you drill in your technique, is that you're not thinking about your technique. You're not thinking about your footwork. You're not thinking about your fitness. You're thinking solely, how do I beat that guy across the net from me? And in doubles, not only do you have that, but you've got to have faith in your partner so that you're not detracting and thinking about, oh, I can't play this shot because if it goes over my head, I know my partner's he's not confident in his overhead at the moment. He's got a slight back injury. He can't go back. So that it changes what you do, and suddenly you're thinking about that and you're not focused on your opponents, and it can just snowball. And for me, in Singapore, Rankireddy and Shetty were playing as two players that were solely focused on the job at hand. And when you combine that with the fact that what they were doing really well, absolutely phenomenal. I think one of the best matches, it wasn't actually their win over Kim Won Ho or Seo Jae. You can actually watch this. Go back, watch their All England match against the young Malaysian pair, Kang Kai-shing and Aaron Tai, and then watch their match against that same pair in Singapore. I noted that the Indians ran out of ideas. They lost the service situation. The defense was jumbled. Things weren't quite gelling in that match against the Malaysians in Singapore. It took them a little while. It took them about a set and a half to get going. Game and a half, sorry. But once they did, you can just see the differences, and you might be able to spot what I'm talking about. So yeah, no, an incredible week for them. I know that there's been a post by Mathias, their former coach, saying that he's back helping them with the tactical side of things. Maybe that's had, and he's been there since just before the Thomas Cup, maybe that's had a slight influence on them. I know that he was, I think, someone that gave them a lot of organisation as a pair. Maybe he's just refound that with them, so maybe that. But personally, I think that they were just two players, and they gave off this vibe. They were just focused on themselves. They knew that they would find their synergy as a pair. They don't need to worry about that side of things. They know their set pieces. They know where each player likes to go. They know like the shots, but they were just focused on individually. What do I need to do in this rally? And their partner, they have faith that their partner would take care of their side of the job. They weren't worrying about each other at all. So I hope that makes sense to you. Right, now, from men's doubles to men's singles. For me, men's singles is, well, I've been saying this for years now, is so crazily open. And I think if we just focus on the two finalists from the Singapore Open, Alex Lanier and Loh Kin Yew, it kind of highlights this perfectly. At the Malaysia Masters just 1 week ago, Alex Lanier lost to He An in the second round, and he's just won the Singapore Open. Loh Kin Yew didn't play the Malaysia Masters, he played the Thailand Open the week before that, and he lost easily in the first round to Srikanth, and he reached the final in Singapore. Now, obviously, we've spoken about conditions being different and all that kind of stuff, but it just shows, for me, that highlights just how open the men's singles is, and how you can go from 1 week where a player could win a tournament, they could lose first round, or they can do the opposite. Let's focus on that final. It was 3 good games of badminton, but what I want to focus on more is, for me, the difference between the two. Why Alex won. Now, for me, again, this isn't everything. Don't go and say, yeah, but what about this, Ben? What about this tactical play or that? There's many things. It's hard to, especially in a match where, 3 games where there's been changes in momentum. I can't name them all, but for me, what stood out, what Alex did better than Loh, was intensity and intent. Now, in the first game, Loh Kin Yew had both. Again, it was all centered around the front of the court, but his intensity, Loh Kin Yew, was high. But his intent, what he was trying to get out of every single rally, was clear. intensity high, intent clear. In the first game, Chen Yu had both, and that's a recipe for a successful game. But then in the second game, I know he went to the faster end, but for me, Chen Yu had neither. His intensity completely dropped, and his intent went away. I was like watching it going, I know you're at the harder end, Lo, but what are you trying to achieve? Are you just willing to just go, right, I'm just going to go for the third game? It wasn't even like, I didn't even sense that he was trying to do that. And then in the third, I felt he dipped in and out. Now, he did do this dipping in and out a little bit in his earlier rounds, but he always finished super strong. In the quarterfinal, he lost the opening game, but he won the second and third very comfortably. He kept that intensity throughout, which kind of shows that he could do it from the faster end too, and he's fast enough as a player to be able to do it. And in the semi-final, I felt he played the third game really well. He suddenly got that intensity, that kind of jumping onto the net, like I said, he played in the first game against Alex. In the third game against Koko Watanabe, in the third, he did that absolutely brilliantly. Again, intensity was matched with intent. Like I said, in the final, it was too up and down with that. Maybe fatigue, but for me, this has always been Chen Yu. Chen Yu's problem is that when the intensity drops, the intent fades with it. He ends up just hitting shots without too much of a plan. For me, I think one area that he could work on, I've seen signs where he looked earlier, I think I might have said that he looked a bit better at this, is that he needs to develop some tactics that he can work, that he can use and can work when he can't go at 100 miles per hour, when the throttle isn't full. So what I mean by that is when the intensity is not all the way up, but say half up, can the intent, what is he trying to do? So I can't play maximally, but what else can I do? He tends, for me, he just kind of just starts to just play around. I think also he needs to be a bit better at spotting situations. Now, for me, like just to kind of go into that, a really good example, I said about in the second that it went gone with the wind. He still managed by the 2/3 mark in that second game to be quite close. He was within shooting distance and actually close enough to the finish line that maybe another burst could have gone. And I think the reason for that is I think Alex actually just dipped a little bit. He went up really fast and then he kind of let Chen Yu back in. And it's there where I'd like to have seen him refine that intent. But I think because he'd just started the game with no intensity nor intent, that when he needed it, he couldn't bring it out. I don't know, maybe he couldn't because of physicality, but I felt that when he was so close to a potential win, he could have. And now I think on terms of, I just said that Alex dipped a little bit there. Overall, and I think throughout the tournament, Alex has actually developed that side of things. The ability that when we can't play at 100% intensity, we always maintain our intent in the rally. We always maintain our game plan. And maybe that game plan needs to change when the intensity can't be at maximum. And for me, that's the difference between these two players. And actually, it's something I think that Alex Lanier's coach, Kęstutis Navickas, said that they've worked on. And that is that being able to play differing styles in drifty conditions. And I think Kęstutis said it's paid off. And obviously, the proof is in the pudding. Now, to finish on Alex, one area I feel Alex has done this in terms of being able to play different styles or to be able to play in driftier conditions is that I think that in his attack, his slices with pace, especially from his round the head corner where he just like brings it down like this, and combined with a nice little reverse drop. I also saw some of those slices where he could also bring it a little shorter up the court. That kind of stuff, I think were very effective tools. And actually very effective against someone like Chen Yu, who is sometimes guilty of sitting a little deep in defence. I think another area that Alex has really worked on is his quality of shot, his shot choice, and his ability to play within the small court area. So what I mean by that is front service line to double service line. When you're playing in fast drifty conditions, a lot of the match can be played in that area because you can't use the back of the court, and using the front of the court can be a little risky. Alex has always been a very athletic player, but I think he's improved his movement and his ability to jump onto shuttles within that area, but is also his shots and shot quality from that area as well. That's definitely another part of his game that I think he has worked on for allowing him to be able to play better in these drifty conditions. But yeah, no, a big win for Alex. his second Super 750 title. But I think it's also big because earlier this year he had admitted that he was suffering from motivational issues just before the Thomas Cup. So I think obviously France doing so well at Thomas Cup and the team getting behind him has kind of reinvigorated him, and he showed all of that here in Singapore. So yeah, no, just to quickly surmise that, intensity and intent for me, Low Kian Yu's intent is only there when he's at maximum intensity. I feel that when he can't play at full speed or full intensity, his intent and what he's trying to do in rallies is just not quite there. It's not that he can't play good rallies. I mean, this is making me sound like he's a really bad player, but he's not. But just something I think he's always been his slight weak side. So they're the main topics. On to your Q&A, your questions. I've picked a few here. Number one, can we expect Intanon to join the top 5 this year? I think. Well, I don't know. It's difficult to say for certain. We never know what could happen. My doubts are a little bit with her knee, that it's still not 100%. But the way that she played in Malaysia and the way that she played in Singapore, it's clearly on the mend, I think. So long as she's sensible, safe, stays injury-free, the way that she played, her match with like Akane Yamaguchi was absolutely sublime. And I think with the fact that we've seen players like Han Yue have some struggles, so she's dipping down, I think Ratchanok can take, just off the top of my head, I think 2 players above her, is it Han Yue and Mordani? If she overtakes those 2, she's top 5. That's completely off the top of my head, by the way. I think certainly very, very possible. Number 2, are the fast-playing editions of the Singapore Open the Achilles heel of Kim Won-ho and Seung-jae? Now, I think the reason for this is it is one of the only events they haven't won both years. They were unable to win it last year where they reached the final, and obviously this year losing in the semi-finals. I think, yes, it's trickier conditions for them because it takes away a little bit from their defense. Their defense is such a strong part, and it's something that they can fall back on if other things aren't working. In Singapore, you simply couldn't work the defense. I still felt they defended pretty damn well, but because you can't rely on it too much, too heavily, that of course it's going to weaken the Korean side ever so slightly. But I think, in all honesty, last year they lost to Aaron Try and So Yik, who were having an absolute golden patch this time last year. Were playing absolutely brilliant and were buoyed by a somewhat home crowd. And then this year they come up against Rankireddy Shetty, who were a similar situation, playing some of their best badminton, or their best badminton since the Paris Olympics, if not before. So they kind of come up against 2 pairs on both years that can play the conditions well, who did play the conditions well, and are very, very strong. Achilles heel, maybe, but let's not forget that last year the Koreans won the Indonesia Open, which is a very drifty arena. And they'll be probably favourites again to win it this year. I think the Singapore changes its drift a little bit more. It's possibly a little bit trickier to play in. It's a slightly bigger, windy arena. Its door is a little bit smaller. But it just showed that the Koreans can play in those windier conditions. I think it's more of a case of coming up against 2 pairs on great form. And the Koreans were off by just a little, but that's all it takes, even for a pair as dominant as them. What happened to Yamaguchi when she led 19-16 and lost 5 straight points? So I did say that I would talk about this match a little bit. But I think it's better to focus on those fast 5 points because it does actually bring up quite a few things. Now, a little bit of context. Seung was a game 9-3 up in that final. She looked to be cruising, but then did go a little passive and let Yamaguchi in. And if you do that, if you drop your pace against Yamaguchi, who's playing very fast with not giving away too many errors and can go from big court to small court and make the game. She's a player that can play with rhythm and can take away rhythm very, very well. And so if you give her an inch, she'll take a mile. And she did that, and she fought a way back in. There were lots of interesting battles going on, which also lead to this question at hand. There were a lot of great return of serves from Yamaguchi, putting huge pressure there. But then Seung flicked 1 or 2 and changed the serve slightly, and also was just a little bit more focused on the third shot. To take that away shows just you how cued in An Seung is to slight tactical changes. Another one was that An Seung put a big effort in near the end to get onto the net, realising how important it was. I felt Yamaguchi was attacking An Seung's backhand with the occasional body and cross smash. Both ladies, if they were slightly late in the corners, they were hitting with more pace, trying to make it more difficult to play the touch shots to the net and to expand the court. And lastly, I think what gave Yamaguchi the lead, because she was playing the faster end, the more difficult end, and this is something that Steen said, that Yamaguchi's ability to control the length from that end, her slightly flatter list where she's kind of nudging and pushing to the corners, were absolutely sublime. And I think that last one actually leads nicely into the question, finally getting to the question, the 1916. Now, one thing that An Seung did was she did a number of deeper net pushes. So when she was here, you can see it wasn't just like, most of the time you see a block, it will go service line a bit deeper, maybe go in tight if they feel they can get the advantage, but it's always a risky thing in singles to go too tight too early. But what An Seung was doing was pushing it another 2 or 3 feet back on that. And there were a few times where, and I think she did that for a few reasons. Jill Clark said it was to stop Yamaguchi from playing the tight spinning net shot, which is somewhat true, but there is more to that. I think one is it gives less time to think for Yamaguchi. It's on her a little bit quicker. The next one is that it's further away from the net, so when Yamaguchi's shot, the same lift that she was doing, and this for me was the big reason I think An Seung did it, and was very, very clever, is that I've just mentioned that Yamaguchi's push and controls into the corners were very good. By pushing a little bit deeper, two things. You saw a few times Yamaguchi actually hitting it rather than side on, rather than say side on, rather than say out here, suddenly there. So a little bit more awkward. But on top of that, those lifts, the shuttle slows down quite a lot quite quickly. When playing them from slight deeper, those flatter lifts are going to die or slow down when they're right in the perfect spot for An Seung to attack. Whereas from, say, 2 or 3 feet further forward, it would slow down slightly behind her, so it would get her to play it from behind her. So by pushing at Yamaguchi that little bit harder, Yamaguchi, clearly at that stage, you're not going to change your tactics too much, is going to go for those same lifts. Right? But because now they're slowing down a bit quicker, An Seung can then jump on them. So it didn't stop Yamaguchi from playing the same shot, it made them less effective. And An Seung would do that constantly, and then wait. And as soon as she got that lift, onto it. And she did that a number of times in those 5 points. Not only that, but obviously, and Steen said this, when it comes to those crunch matches, I mentioned at the start, the champion's mentality, An Seung is so strong. But those slightly deeper, sharper pushes were absolutely crucial. An Seung was pouncing on those lifts, and she was able to do so for the reasons I said. But it was a fantastic match. If this is the Yamaguchi after a few weeks of training, or full training, I'm excited to see more matches between these two. And if you combine that with what I mentioned earlier about how a lot of other ladies, a number of them from the golden generation stepping up, women's singles could become a lot more interesting and exciting. I still think An Seung will win the majority, and I still wouldn't rule out Wang Ziyi. Who knows whether she's going through a hard training moment at the time, focusing on the China Open and the World Championships a little later in the year. But I still think An Seung is going to win the majority, but we'll see more of these tighter matches. Number 4, most memorable match for me, Yamaguchi. I mentioned it or alluded to it. It was Yamaguchi versus Ratchanok in the quarterfinals. It's a classic golden generation match. The speed and intensity was super high. There were some big errors, but considering the approach from both, I felt the error rate was quite low. I spoke about being not afraid to take a few blows, to make a few errors, trying to do the right things in these kind of halls, and both Yamaguchi and Ratchanok were willing to take that. And actually, considering they were doing that approach, I felt the error rate was pretty damn low. There was deceptions on everything, both trying to get the initiative. It's so hard to regain advantage from a disadvantaged position in that hall. There were comebacks, there were crazy net battles. Both players were going for super sharp shots. It was just outstanding standing badminton. It was really close and tight and could have gone either way, but it was Yamaguchi who did eventually win it. And last question, because this actually leads to being able to talk about a little about women's doubles, because I sometimes often overlook it, but there's a few things to say. The question's not too important, but it segues. Would Nami Matsuyama, that is, be back with Shida anytime soon? Now, the answer to the question, no. 2 reasons. I think Nami Matsuyama has made it abundantly clear that she wants to do mixed doubles. She's kind of gone the reverse route of Arisa Igarashi. But secondly, Nami Matsuyama has only just really started her rehab and her road to recovery from her horrific knee injury that she suffered at the Vietnam Open early this year. I think where she did not just her ACL but MCL. So she's on the road to recovery, although it's been looking very promising. I've been following her progress on Instagram, and it's really good to see. Now, I picked this question because I actually did want to talk about Igarashi and Shida, because a little bit like Watanabe and Taguchi, in a way, 2 very successful players, Igarashi in the mixed and Shida with Nami in the women's doubles, Olympic bronze medalists, world medalists, all those kind of things, all England champions. Together, you think they'd make a pretty good pair, but things haven't quite gelled, and it's been a little while since we've seen them get to the latter stages of a tournament of this level. They reached the semi-finals here, where they lost to Zhang Shushan and Jai Fan, who actually eventually won. Now, big question, do I feel that the Japanese pair are showing improvements? Are they becoming a little bit more dangerous as a pair? In all honesty, I watched some of the earlier rounds and it looked a bit better, but when they came up against Zhang Shushan and Jai Fan, I felt they weren't able to exert any pressure whatsoever. They definitely didn't feel too dangerous in this match. Slightly better synergy, but not at a level to hurt a pair of the Chinese caliber who are also playing some fabulous badminton. For me, there isn't anything too damaging about their game. They can play fast, they can defend well, they can attack well, but I just, watching that match, I just didn't feel that they could apply pressure to the Chinese in kind of any department. I felt the Japanese defense, and again, I think for the conditions here, I've already said, you couldn't defend too deep, you couldn't defend too often, you needed to come forward and take some risks, and I just felt that the defense of the Japanese was a bit too set and a bit too deep. And for me, that's a little bit surprising, because I would have felt with Igarashi's mixed doubles background, I know she played the backcourt quite a lot with Watanabe, but you can't not go to the net in mixed doubles, especially at the level she played at. And I think with Shida being, also a player who's pretty quick and able to do that, I'm surprised they weren't trying to do that. But yeah, no, I still think it's a bit too early, but it's going to take, if they are going to ever get to a point where they can link up a bit better as a pair, it's going to take a little bit more time. And if they're a pair that can't, they need to find other solutions. I mean, if I bring one other pair in that I think have done very well, considering I don't think they link up as well as they could, is Pearly Tan and Tina Griffin. They found areas of their game that worked well together, but they don't link in their attack as well as I think they could do. Maybe the same will be for the Igarashi and Shida, but if they can't, then they need to find other solutions. It's weird, because Igarashi can do it with, I've seen it with other players in the women's doubles, and obviously Shida was able to do it with Nami Matsuyama. When they were playing well, they could almost have this kind of bang 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 kind of game. And again, another reason why I want, quickly, just to shift the last topic, another reason I wanted to bring up this question is I can segue it slightly to my own question, because I want to talk a little bit about the final. Because it was a slightly surprising result, because it wasn't the world number ones, Liu Shengshu and Tan Ning, that won. It was Zhang Shushan and Jai Fan. And for me, the question is people talked about, I had a few questions about Kim Won Ho and So Sun Jae, and if the Singapore Open is their Achilles heel, is it also the Achilles heel of Liu Shengshu and Tan Ning? Because this was the first time they reached a final here. The last 2 years they fell in the semi-finals, and they've had a few surprising losses. I think they lost to, it was one of the tournaments where they lost to Iwanaga and Nakanishi. So yeah, is it their Achilles heel as well? I actually felt, up until the final, they were absolute dominant in their semi against Beckman and Liu So-hee. They looked. I said that the Japanese couldn't put pressure on Zhang and Jia, but if you watch the Koreans, they couldn't even do. They could do even less against Liu and Tan. They were like defending on a dime. They were just pushing it away like they wanted to, and their attack is absolutely like frighteningly powerful and scary. But in the final, obviously they weren't able to win, and I think a big difference. In all honesty, I said that the Chinese Liu and Tan could defend really well against the Koreans, but that's because I felt the Koreans actually played a bit one-dimensionally, a bit from the backcourt, the same sort of smashes coming every single time. Not enough soft play, not enough variety, and Liu Xinxu and Tan Ning kind of sit back. Whereas I felt, especially Jia Fan, she was very patient in her attack. It wasn't like she'd do like devastating stop drops and all this stuff, but if you watch, it's patient, and then she's placing it in different spots. Very thoughtful behind every single smash that Jia Fan hit or very attack had a purpose, had a reason to do it. And then when combined with the fact that I felt Zhang Shushan was very good on the net, I mean, talking about her, I always felt that she could have made a very good mixed doubles player because she was so quick and sharp here and at the net, and she showed all of those skills in this tournament and especially in the final. I think, like I said, I think Zhang Shifan and Jia Fan defended well, but they also changed pace in the mid-court shots. They created a lot of uncertainty for Liu and Tan, something that Baek and Lee couldn't do or not many other pairs could do. And for me, you could see with Liu and Tan, they weren't sure whether they should step in or step back. There was this uncertainty, like I said, and I saw none of that against the Koreans. They knew when to come forward, when to go back. They almost could predict what's going to happen next. And I felt Zhang Shushan and Jia Fan were able to disrupt that rhythm very well. It was a really nice women's doubles final, actually, a real battle with both pairs using all of the courts. Liu and Tan did have their chances. They had 2 game points in the first, but weren't able to convert. But yeah, no, is this hall also a bit of an Achilles heel? Not so sure, but I would definitely say it's more of a case of it being an Achilles heel for them than it is for Kim Won-ho and Sursun Jae. So there you have it, everyone. That is everything that I want to talk about on this Beckman episode of Beckman's Breakdown on the Singapore Open Super 750. As always, thank you for watching. If you have any of your own thoughts, please do add them in the comments. If you've got any extra context or updates or anything that you think I've missed, then again, put them in the comments. We can always discuss. If we keep things civil, which I'm pretty proud of with my comment section, it's usually very constructive comments. A number of you take a lot of time and effort into writing detailed comments, and I do read all of them, and I do try to respond to as many of them as I can. I do like reading them because a number of them, I'll be honest, have got me to think about pairs and players in different lights and think of different things for the future. It's really good. So it's a learning curve for me. I do my best to, this is just my own honest, humble opinion on all of these things, but it's not, it's by no means always 100% correct or not open to disagreement. And I like to think I see myself as someone who's willing to be open-minded about a lot of these things. So yeah, again, thanks for watching. I will see you this time next week because it is the Indonesia Open. And we'll actually be doing, quick update on that, I will be doing a couple of TikTok watch-alongs for the BWF. I think I'll be doing 2 of them. I think they'll be coming on Wednesday and on Saturday, where I'll be watching 2 matches and just live streaming me just talking a load of crap to all of you. So if you're on TikTok, I will be putting stuff on my Instagram about when that will be happening, and I'm sure BRF will too. Maybe some of you will join me there, and maybe it might give me some ideas for future content where we can do it somewhere. I'm not quite sure. I need to think that through. But anyway, again, thanks for watching. If you haven't, please do like and share the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you like it, then please do. It does help me out. But if you don't want to, that's also fine. See you all next week.